All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a small group here, so I don't want this to be terribly formal. Sometimes, so I guess it's like more formal talks, but that's not this. So, wanted to get a chance to, get to, just get to know you guys a bit. Yeah, I mean, I can just start with some opening kind of thoughts. There's a bunch of questions that came in. We wanted to just introduce, ourselves. I wanted to, we want to get a chance to, get to know, you guys a bit better. But yeah, I can start with just maybe some opening, thoughts. Well, first, I guess I'll just, thank you for kind of your support of the project. The background like of our team, we actually do have this kind of like DevOps background, and even when we started, PureStake, the company, like back in the beginning of 2019, we were running like doing mostly focused on infrastructure and like validators. So I think we continue to run. Actually, we have like a Kusama and some Polkadot validators. So I think that experience has kind of definitely influenced like some of the design decisions in Moonbeam. Kind of coming from this place where we were actually providing the service to those networks. And we can talk about some of those a little bit. But yeah, I think for us, like the co-leaders are quite like an important component, like of not only of the system but of the community that we're trying to build and or trying to help foster along. And I do think I do see like some different points of view on this, and I think I even looked at some of the questions, previewed a little bit, that yeah, there's kind of this there is this kind of story I've heard or narrative I've heard where it's like, well, like yes, you just kind of only need like one honest one, and like it's kind of like the heavy lifting is done by the validators on the relay chain, and like the collators on the parachains, okay, they kind of just do this thing. And like I kind of reject that notion. That doesn't really make sense to me. While it's true that the relay chain validators in Polkadot or Kusama are providing kind of the backbone of the security of the system, they're checking for correctness. I mean, still this kind of being in this position where you can decide like which transactions are either going to go in or not go into a block, what order like those transactions are in. I mean, I think this is where you see like on the Ethereum side, there's quite a bit of thinking that's going on in this area now, right? With like this whole MEV discussion, you can see the rise of like flash bots. Like, I think people are coming to the realization that, being in that position where you are kind of deciding even just the ordering of transactions or the ability to insert your own, is an extremely kind of like privileged position to be in. So, this kind of idea that, if anyone can do that, that is not correct. I'm quite confident. So that's what was another reason we felt that, having kind of an open and permissionless system, like to, be able to select collators was quite important. And in fact, that didn't even exist. So that's where we've done work on, this parachain staking palette to implement, the staking system that would drive the selection of collators in an open and kind of permissionless way. And that required some work there, because you can't just take pallet staking and like put it into a parachain. That does not work. Parachains have this much more constrained like execution, like they have more execution constraints, and things like fragment are like way too expensive to put into like a parachain. Like you can't do it. So it needs like a different kind of approach to fit into the like execution requirements of what a parachain has available to it. And so I think the goals we had is we wanted to create kind of a fair system where good quality collators could come in and perform the service for the network, be whole on infrastructure costs. I mean, this is kind of challenges that we had, like being a validator ourselves, is sometimes you don't even like pay for infrastructure costs. And yeah, so you're getting kind of tokens, but it's I think sometimes the economics of being a validator are weird, right? Where it's like you do all this work, you're getting some tokens, but then you kind of think about it, you're like, should I have gone and done all this work, or should I have just like bought the tokens on the market? It was kind of this very complex way to like buy tokens I just did, right? So I think we wanted to kind of try to create a system that was fair, that like kind of had like a as even a distribution as like we could achieve, and gave like an opportunity for for people who wanted to perform this collation service to come in and provide that to the network. So, and then I think, we see it as a source of differentiation. So like, not all parachains are doing this, right? So I think that it kind of, is a way that we can differentiate, to also have like this better decentralization story. A lot of the projects that are deploying to Moonbeam are coming from Ethereum. So they're coming from a network that is like highly, has like very good decentralization characteristics. So, I think this also helps, helps with that discussion, right? Just to kind of explain how Polkadot works. A lot of times we're educating, these teams on it, and to explain, how different like important actors in the system, are not centralized. So yeah, I think there's other good questions coming later, so I don't want to keep going on that. But yeah, so I know the goal here was just to kind of, again, get to meet some of you guys, hear what some of your thoughts are. So I wanted to, you guys know me, but I want to introduce kind of some of the rest of the team here. Some of the, why don't we go around actually? Like, I mean, why don't you guys introduce yourself? Because I know some of the folks here from the PureStake side are on the DevOps team, and they're probably less, they're not people usually giving talks and this kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can get started with that. So my name is Francisco. I think I've written to many of you like on Discord or Telegram, but it's a pleasure to meet you guys, like to put a face on some of you. So I work on the business development team. I take care of markets related work, amongst other things, and just helping the ecosystem on Moonbeam grow from a partnership perspective. And yeah, just to echo what Derek said, I mean, I think it's great that we're having this event to celebrate the collator community on Moonbeam, and it's great that you guys showed up. And I mean, yeah, we're looking forward to kind of foster this community as the network grows. So thank you all for being here.
Hey guys, I'm Mark Caseman. I'm the DevOps manager here at PureStake. I guess I started maybe about 2 years ago at this point, and I started with running Kusama and Polkadot validators. And now, of course, we run our own development and production Moonbeam networks as well. I'm sure I've talked to almost all of you on Discord, so it's really nice to put a face to you, and look forward to working with you more in the future.
Hey everybody, Tim Baldwin, VP of Engineering. So I was one of the original folks starting at PureStake, building our DevOps practice back in the day, and currently have responsibility for a number of things. You might see me on Discord as PureStake TDB. Art is much more day to day, but I'm really excited. And I'm actually on vacation, but I wanted to hop on and get a chance to meet everybody. And thank you for participating and all your feedback and all the hard work that you guys do on behalf of the network. Thank you.
Hi guys, this is Kathy from the marketing team. I run all the parts of the community, so it's exciting to also see now how the collators community is growing, and like we also have some ambassadors joining us. Like Tim said, like thank you so much for everything you're doing for the network, for keeping the decentralization and all the great job that you're already doing. So we're happy to be here with you, and we're definitely gonna plan more activities to engage with the community and these networking activities that I think that are very important. So why don't we start now with a quick intro of you? So you want to start maybe Mark, who's like my first window here.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So hi everyone, I'm Mark from Switzerland. I'm running the Let's Bake staking service since 2018. I was starting with Tezos and then gradually widened my focus now also to Kusama and Polkadot and now Moonriver, so all the substrates networks, which excites me. Yeah, but also other networks. So I'm really excited to be part of this network here. Thank you.
Cool.
I'm Jim Farley. I am the founder and president of CERTM. I started CERTM at the start of this year after being involved with blockchain and DLT, mostly on it from the outside looking in. And mid last year, I started spinning up some validators on Secret Network, Tezos, trying to test things out. And towards the end of the year, I said, you know what, why don't I actually try to do this more formally and take my own personal experience, 20 years in IT with networking technologies, security and infrastructure, now more on the DevOps in the past few years, and see how if I can really help support all these great projects coming out with a more formalized structure. So I did a survey of all the new and exciting projects, and really dug into Polkadot and Kusama and substrate-based chains, and then read more about Moonbeam, and really saw this massive potential with it. And so I reached out, and the end result is being here talking with you guys. So really appreciate the opportunity, and it just feels like a great start to what's going to be a great project.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Flavian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Flavian from Buer Labs. We are a team of 16 engineers with extensive DevOps experience and backend experience, and we have different points where we focus. We are mostly technical guys, and we focus on API services and on validators. Actually, we have Silvio here as well. I think he was mostly discussing with Art, but he is under my name as well, because somehow I shared the the link, and we both appear with the same name. Funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello guys. Sorry, I can't. Sorry to interrupt. I can't really join with video because I have a low bandwidth. I'm in the car right now, but I'm really glad to meet you all.
Thank you. Let's see, Sebastian, Hayden, do you want to go next? Or Iban?
Yeah, I can move on if you want. I have my camera off since I'm driving right now, since I'm inside of my car with my girls. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a traffic controller as a profession, but I've been administering and doing DevOps work for nearly 25 years as a side job. And yeah, I joined the whole crypto space 1.5 years ago. We're a small team working there. And I joined the Moonbeam project because I must say that maybe it was more like a personal taste thing, not only seeing the potential of the project, but as well seeing how the things were being handled inside of the whole communication channels that yeah, not only Kathy, but as well as Alberto and Francisco are like yeah, how they are spending their hours like sharing experience and helping a lot of people in a very passionate way and with a very open communication. That not always is the way things are done. And yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of the regulator team there. And yeah, hope we don't get late today to the patching that is meant to happen at 16. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Peter from Polkadoters.
Yeah, hello guys. So I'm Petr from Polkadoters. We are a Czech-based and Slovakia-based community from Europe, and we support like various Polkadot projects by writing articles, producing content, doing interviews, and basically stuff like that. But also we decided to validate on networks as well. So we are part of 1,000 validators program on both Kusama and Polkadot networks. And also we help other networks with setting up their test nets. So we are on Site Guys, Plasm, and maybe others who didn't start their chain yet. And I'm really glad to be here. Actually, I'm quite proud to be one of the initial collectors of the Moon River. So awesome job, guys, for winning the second auction. That's really great. And I'm looking forward to work with you.
Yeah, us as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, let's see who else we have here. We have Sebastian or Remo that just joined. If you want to do a quick intro.
Hello, I'm Sebastian. I'm from StakeSquid. We are an infrastructure hosting company based in Georgia, Tbilisi, and we run mainly graph, like the graph indexers, which is the Ethereum-based indexers for smart contracts that people can query via a GraphQL API. And as such, I'm interested in all the Ethereum compatible projects that start right now. And this is how I got to Moonbeam and Moon River. And yeah, I'm excited that finally Polkadot get started, like now with Kusama and Moonriver. I'm really curious how it will go.
Cool.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks for all the intros, guys. Like to follow up with this, I'm just gonna ask Derek some questions that were asked from the collator community itself. And yeah, at any point, if you want to kind of intervene or ask like a follow-up question based on a question I asked, feel free to do so. I mean, this is meant to kind of have an open floor for the collators to speak with us. So I mean, don't be shy in that regard. So yeah, I think that the first question that the community asked, Derek, is which I think is quite recurrent in our community as well, is how have you positioned Moonriver versus Moonbeam, and kind of maybe what's the relationship between those two networks?
Yeah, so I guess like I have some ideas, but in the end, I think the market will decide, like more than, you know, I can give you kind of my thoughts and some of the things that we think are going to happen. But I mean, I think you already saw this with Kusama versus Polkadot. I think that the original intent from Parity and like what's happened are not exactly like, you know, are somewhat divergent basically. So I mean, here are some thoughts. I mean, I think, you know, for any project, you know, as you guys know, that's serious about the Polkadot ecosystem, I think almost every project has like a Kusama deployment as well. That's almost a requirement. You know, the original Parity idea of, you know, being able to have a deployment environment with real value as a way to ensure kind of the safety and security and improve like deployment velocity. I think we buy all those things. I mean, that's correct. You know, coming from, you know, kind of non-blockchain world, you know, that is one of the things that strikes you when you come into this world where, you know, the deployments are like generally like pretty few and far between, right? Whereas, you know, like in, you know, on a regular like Web2 company, you know, you have like deployments happening like every day, basically, maybe, right? So that is one of those like kind of striking things. You know, is that ever going to be the case in blockchain? Probably not, given like the, you know, the amount of care that needs to be taken. But, you know, kind of the twice a year kind of thing you see on other networks. I mean, I do think that that definitely constrains the ability of these projects to react to the changing market and to, you know, just to be adaptive, right? The market's changing pretty fast. So, so we buy that idea, but I think that, you know, the thing that was perhaps, you know, surprising or not intended was this whole, I mean, there is like a, you know, a different community like around Kusama that's kind of taken it in a different direction. And you see these kind of like NFT use cases in particular, like, you know, seem to be getting traction on Kusama. So I kind of see it this way that, you know, as a project, you know, we have these two deployments and it's basically, you know, what do we have? We're offering block space to the market. That's the thing that we're, you know, ultimately that we're providing. And by having like two sets, you know, we have, you know, more block space. I think there is quite a bit of demand for block space, like in general. And I think that they have, you know, the fact that they have these like different costs and security profiles will mean that like different use cases will kind of like, you know, target one or the other. I mean, my expectation is that use cases that require like less economic security, but still need like, you know, a full environment, like, you know, like NFTs, for example, or at least some NFTs, perhaps gaming, you know, these kinds of use cases like will ultimately, you know, may target like Moonriver as like their final deployment destination, not as, you know, part of a dual deployment. And in the same way, you know, we have talked to teams that are like, no, like we just need like the highest security guarantees that are available. And so like a Moonriver deployment may not make sense, and we're just going to have a Moonbeam deployment. So you have kind of those exceptions on the wings, but then there are a bunch of people that are like, we're going to deploy to both, basically, right? So I think for the projects that kind of buy into that original Parity idea, they kind of go to both. So yeah, I think, you know, it was important for us to kind of, you know, have these two deployments, but I think we'll kind of see what happens like as we launch these, like, you know, I think the market will tell us a little bit of what's going to happen.
All right, cool.
Hey Derek, can I actually ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So is there going to be any difference between feature sets of Moonriver and Moonbeam, or is it going to be basically the same from the user's perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think our desire would be to have you know, it won't always be the same, but to have the same code base with new features going to, you know, Moonriver first. So, you know, I think that in the early part of the network, that's going to be the case. So like, you know, we develop something and then there's kind of a deployment pipeline, right? Where, you know, we will deploy to like Moonbase Alpha, you know, vet the features like there. we will, I mean, at some point, hopefully we can get like a permanent like spot on, for our Moon Shadow network. That seems to not be possible. That's the West End deployment. We keep getting kind of asked to step out of there to like make room for other people. So I think they don't have enough validators or something. But we want like a test environment that has multiple teams on it, so we can like test interoperability scenarios. Whether that's West End or something we provide is a little bit TBD. Then we would move to like a Moon River deployment of that same change, and then we'd move to a Moonbeam deployment. So think of it as almost like, there's these different environments, and like a new feature will kind of like make its way through these different deployment environments. Now, the caveat I would say is that, of course, these are like on-chain governed networks. So, is it possible that like these diverge in the future? Yes. I mean, I think that's possible just because the token holders may decide.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
All right, cool. So I think that clarifies that topic. I'll skip the second question since it was more or less tied to that first one. So Derek, I mean, what would you say are the top priorities for Moonbeam in which community-led collators can impact the most? And collators also want to know like how can they positively impact Moonbeam's success moving forward?
No, that's a good question. I mean, I would say, right, I mean, obviously, like the most important things in front of us right now are just having, getting, both networks launched. And, I think the reliability, stability, and security of like the base layer is quite important. And we have obviously a lot of teams coming from Ethereum in particular, like that, they're not used to there being kind of like major kind of like infrastructural problems, right? So I think that that's definitely a key concern that we want to, we want to make sure that we, have as stable and reliable an environment as possible. First impressions matter, right? So as some of our partners, protocol partners deploy, and then they're inviting, or there's mounting like marketing campaigns to get users. We want to make sure that, that things are like secure, stable, that we're providing kind of a reliable service, because that's the one thing that will make developers kind of think twice, right? Is if there's a lot of stability issues, then they might say, well, is this, is there something, are there other options? Is there something more stable, and so on. So I'd say that's one, concern. And that, even internally, just so you guys know that we have this rule of like security and reliability come first. So whenever there's discussion of, okay, we want these features, we want this other feature, if there's like some stability or like security problem, then there's like a rule we have at PureStake, at least, that like you can always trump anyone, like, with feature requests, basically, right? If you have something that's, going to be a threat to the network or anything like this, then yeah, it may be the case that we have to, go back and say, hey, like you can't have this feature like we promised, but, because we're always trying to prioritize like, the security and stability. So I'd say that's one thing. But I would say the second thing is, we're still in a phase here where we're like, most people don't know about our project. So, I think people that are into Polkadot do, like, so if you're in the Polkadot ecosystem, you've probably heard of us, but, you speak about people more broadly, we're not the kind of project that had, we didn't raise $1 gazillion, like, and, have these like big marketing things. We're a little bit more of a, grassroots bootstrapped, kind of project, I'd call it, just in terms, comparing to like some of the other like, chains, big chains basically out there. So I would say that, that's it's kind of like community growth and like awareness is definitely a big thing, I think at this stage of the network, basically, to just, to just have people understand that like this is an option, right? So I'd say that, those would be two things I would highlight as being important right now.
All right, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so the next question is also an interesting one. So the collators wanted to know, can a parachain like Moonbeam or Moon River get so big to accommodate the whole, like the entire Ethereum ecosystem?
I mean, I think when it comes to just, the capacity of the chain itself, I mean, we should have more, we'll have more throughput than like Ethereum mainnet does. So, if it works on Ethereum, it should, if all of that moved, it would be better like on Moonbeam. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the Ethereum model, right? So I think, what I expect to see is that, the blocks are empty to start. They will fill over some period of time. It'll be cheap, while the blocks are kind of unfilled. Once the blocks get filled, then the same kind of gas market mechanism will kind of kick in. And then we'll see kind of where, it'll be kind of a function of demand for that block space. We do have where we are out the gate, is going to improve substantially. So for example, right now, all parachains are running at this 12-second dish or 13-second block time. That's expected to, or at least there'll be a choice where either you can lower your block time to 6 seconds to match the relay chain, or there's this contextual execution thing, which some of you may not be aware of, but that's a feature that the parity team is working on, where, because basically right now parachains have to fit, the guidance is that we have to fit within a half a second WASM execution time on the relay chain. This is a big constraint. So that means that for our WASM binary, the state transition function, we can only rely on half a second every 6 seconds of WASM execution time. And the problem is if we make a block that's too big, then the relay chain validators don't have enough time to validate it, and then we'll have a stalled chain. So this is one of these critical constraints that you have to operate under as a parachain right now. So I think what Parity's plan in the future is they're going to offer a choice of either you can lower your block time to 6 seconds, so you at least get more throughput, or you can do this contextual execution where, let's say you leave the block time at 12 seconds, but you'll get more WASM execution time, basically, on the relay chain. So we haven't decided that yet, but yeah, that's kind of a future choice. So we could either, that would dramatically raise the block gas limit that we have on our blocks. Yeah, we're probably going to raise it anyway. Even in the half a second WASM time, we can we have some room to raise it. But yeah, there's a bunch of kind of performance optimizations, I'll put it that way, that are coming.
Okay, understood. Yeah, no, I know that's been a topic that's asked by the community quite a lot. So how many collators are planned when the network will be fully launched, and what's your vision of how that will develop kind of moving forward?
Yeah, so I would like quite a broad set of collators, but there are some, it's not just, the answer is not just the maximum number or whatever, right? Because there's a couple of things I would say here. One is, I already mentioned it, right? I think we want being a collator to be something that makes sense from a financial perspective. So that's one constraint that I think that will become clearer too, as these networks launch, and then we can understand what the token value is. I think that that will influence some of this. So for example, I wouldn't want it to be the case that you're just people would be underwater on infrastructure costs to run a proper setup. Basically, that wouldn't make sense to me. So at least I wouldn't be supportive of expanding way beyond the point at which it becomes a kind of a lossy proposition. But yeah, so I think there obviously is that's at least one of the constraints. We have done work on the performance side, so that I don't think that it's a technical constraint so much. But yeah, that's at least one thought there.
Okay, and kind of following up on that question, I don't know if you already have kind of a mental map or roadmap or vision of how the collator community will kind of evolve on Moonbeam.
We want, I see it as a big source of strength for the project. So yeah, we want to be inclusive as we can. In terms of numbers, just on the last question, right? We had this this goal of 32 minimum for a Moon River launch and 64 minimum for a Moonbeam launch. I think we're gonna, and so then on Moon River we want to get to 64 at a minimum in order to say, hey, this is vetted and gonna be a supported thing for Moonbeam. And so I think that's kind of the more tactical near term is moving it to kind of 64, and then we'll see if it makes sense to to advocate for moving it beyond that.
Yeah, that's clear. The next question, the collators want to know, it's been made kind of clear the phased approach or the phased rollout launch process of Moon River, and the collators wanted to know what your stance or the Moonbeam Foundation stance is in terms of maintaining the current collator set once phase 4 has hit. Will the foundation kind of maintain the current collator set to ensure stability at that point? Or once phase 4 hits, will that be the start of the permissionless process where it could get quite competitive for collators to get into the active set?
Yeah, you know, and again, we don't have someone from the Moonbeam Foundation here, so I'm going to a little bit speak on their behalf here. Yeah, I would say I have a few thoughts on this. I mean, in general, I don't know that it makes sense for, you know, PureStake or the Moonbeam Foundation to be dictating, you know, exactly who it is that's kind of like in the set. I mean, then you might as well have like a POA network, right? If it's just going to be like strictly dictated. So I see that, you know, my take would be that it's kind of, but we, you know, we do want to make sure that some of the principles that like we are after are maintained. So for example, fairness is like a big one for us, like, fairness, if there's like any like bad actors or other things, you know, I think that would require like intervention of some kind. But I think the long-term vision is to kind of be more, it's more kind of like, you know, intervention when there's like problems on the network, kind of like, you know, that kind of idea versus hey, there's just like some set of people that like will always be supported in, right? So because, you know, again, I think that's kind of what is needed to support that principle of we have an actual open and permissionless like set. So yes, I do think that like once like phase 4 you know, is reached, that will be, you know, will be opened up. I mean, that's, you know, and then there will be a little bit of a, you know, we'll see kind of what happens. Of course, you know, I think we, again, like security, stability, like these other things are important. So if there's interventions needed to help support that as a principle, you know, that, you know, those interventions would happen.
Okay, understood.
But, you know, also I'd point out that, you know, we have like I mean, there's a for real decentralization plan here. So that might be in the early days like that can be done, but the ability of, you know, even the Moonbeam Foundation to do that will like greatly diminish over time, basically, where like that won't be possible, you know, like, you know, later on, basically.
Yeah. So the next question asks whether a parachain like Moonriver will be able to replicate the EVM one-to-one, or what would be some differences between the original EVM, between Moonriver's EVM?
Yeah, so there is like a, you know, a brand new EVM implementation that's like, you know, most of the EVM compatible chains you see out there are Geth forks, right? So that's what, in particular exchanges, so that's like, you know, BSC, you know, a lot of the exchange chains are basically Geth forks that then, you know, are hooked up to the assets and liquidity that are like in the exchange. And ours is different. It is like a from scratch like EVM implementation. You know, it was primarily done by a parity core engineer named Wei, who, by the way, is like, you know, like one of the, you know, he's kind of like a genius like engineer, basically, like this guy Wei. But yeah, so you know, we have like a new Rust-based implementation, and this will be one of the first deployments of like this EVM. I would say that but you know, it does, you know, the design goal of it is to be conformant like with like the EVM spec, right? So the different opcodes that are there, you know, pre-compiles. I mean, we've done like a bunch of effort to just, you know, ensure, you know, one-to-one compatibility with the EVM. In terms of differences, you know, there are some. So, you know, what I note. So, for example, like obviously, there's like a different like consensus mechanism, like you know, on Moonriver and Moonbeam. So that means like some of the RPCs that are on that are part of the kind of Ethereum spec, like don't like have any meaning. So things like you know, what's the current difficulty of the network? That's like a proof of work related concept that, yeah, I think we would just like return 0, or we would just return some number, basically, like when anyone calls that. So that's, you know, there's kind of a set of differences in that kind of area, but they tend not to matter for most like application deployments. You know, I'd say that there are some differences because we are in this like substrate like environment. We have this like unified account substrate like type environment. Yeah, I mean, differences. There's like this, you know, you can obviously use the substrate APIs to do things like with the same accounts, and then those changes, if insofar as they affect state, will basically like happen like on the EVM side, right? So we have like the same account like underlying, you know, provided, you know, in the data layer, like regardless of whether you access the node through substrate or the Web3 RPCs. So that's you know, there are some differences in behavior. Or different new things you can do, I guess I would call it there. But I think probably the thing that I'm most excited about is, you know, so you've all these things have happened, and the question is, well, why do all those things? Like maybe why not just fork Geth, right? That's quite easy, right? I mean, you click a couple times, you have a Geth fork. The answer is because by doing it in this approach and having the substrate native implementation, it allows us to be a parachain, which then opens the door for all of these cross-chain integrations. And out the gate, we will only have like a few, but this is something I'm extremely kind of like bullish on, right? And this is kind of marrying kind of the EVM and Ethereum style approach, like with the power of Polkadot. I mean, so you already see some of the things. So for example, like we have a set of staking precompiles, and there's going to be some governance precompiles shortly too, where, so basically on the substrate RPCs, you can do staking or governance. But now we're offering like, access to that functionality from the EVM side, right? So you have these precompiles through which you can access staking and governance functionality. That's something that like, those precompiles are kind of like a window like into local substrate functionality. Beyond that, so that's local though, but beyond that, obviously the Polkadot story is about providing access to like functionality on other chains. So right now we're working on being able to access relay chain like functionality like from precompiles. So as a developer and from smart contracts like on Moonriver. So as a developer, you can basically moving K. That's one obvious thing. Like we need to be able to do that. But more generically, as a developer, if you want to work with KSM and from like a smart contract environment, you'd be able to do that. So you'll be able to set up a smart contract that then, for example, like can perform like governance or staking actions on the relay chain, like from like a dApp, basically like on Moonbeam on the relay chain. So that's like going to be one of the first examples of kind of what I call like a native multi-chain application, like based on Polkadot. So, and then tons of other parachain teams, and I think this is where things start to get like quite interesting, is when we start extending the functionality of the core EVM, with these other like cross-chain enabled functions. Yeah. So.
Can I do a little follow-up on that question? So,
yeah, go ahead.
So for example, I have a dApp on Ethereum, and I have a smart contract there deployed, and also on the back end, I have some off-chain computation to help the front end to show some information to the user that relies on RPC or some WebSockets calls that I have in my backend. How easy would it be for me to simply port everything on Moonriver, for example? Would that be straight away, or should should we look for breaking changes, or how do you see that?
Any existing Ethereum application should be like a straightforward like port. And we've done this like with a lot of applications, complicated ones at this point, like Balancer, like Aave, other ones. Like, so basically you should be able to take your deployment scripts, point them to Moonbase Alpha or Moonriver, and like everything should work. And like I said, the differences, or some of the RPCs that we don't have, are things that I would doubt you're using. So things like things related to the proof of work consensus mechanism and some of these other specialty kind of RPCs. The different, we have a different network ID, so that's like one change. You got to change in your deployment scripts what the network ID is, and then that leads to some other. So for example, we've seen when we're deploying some things, deployed contract addresses become different than when you do a new deployment on Moonbeam. So that if you're referencing those in other places, there can be a little exercise of finding the contract addresses and then kind of putting like new addresses like in different places. You can actually avoid this because if you deploy things in a certain way, you can get consistent addresses even when you're deploying to chains with different IDs, but that's something that we've seen. But again, I wouldn't call this like heavy lifting. This is kind of like, it's kind of just like small changes needed like sometimes to get things to deploy. So yeah, I would encourage you to try deployment. We have obviously the folks in Discord that can like, from the dev relations team that can help you with this.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, another question, Derek, that earlier on you spoke kind of if there would be a difference in feature set between Moonriver and Moonbeam. And I think the collators also wanted to know like what's your opinion on like the communities that will actually be created on Moonriver versus Moonbeam for actual like for collators, since they are independent networks. So do you see that community being similar or divided?
I mean, I see it as, I mean, if you look at Kusama and Polkadot, that's kind of the one reference example we have. You know, I think anyone who wanted to ultimately be a Polkadot validator, a lot of those folks started on Kusama, right? And that's what we did. So I expect the same thing to happen here. I will say though that, I mean, it is the case that there are some differences in like the holders, where I do think the Kusama holders tend to be more like, you know, more smaller holders, I guess. Whereas, you know, for DOT, there are like more institutional holders, right? That like made like investments early on. So that does perhaps flavor things a little bit, but I would expect to see like a lot of the same people, right? And you know, from our perspective, obviously someone who's, you know, kind of engaged with Moon River and kind of like understands how the system works is probably gonna be in a much better place to be able to support like Moonbeam.
Understood. And yeah, there's another question which you alluded to more or less before, but I think another question that was raised by collators is that some people saw that in kind of the collator documentation on the Polkadot wiki, they state that it's not recommended to have a large set of collators because they can potentially slow down the network.
I see, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the question is why did Moonbeam decide to have kind of a larger number of collators, and maybe what trade-offs do you see in your opinion?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I kind of already mentioned some of this, that, you know, I think that for us, it's this open and permissionless collator set is quite important to maintaining kind of transparency and like the ability for the network to kind of react if there's anyone that might be abusing like that position, right? So when it comes to like, you know, again, things like MEV extraction or censorship or other things of that nature. So I think, you know, we want like there to be visibility on that, and we want like an ability for people to kind of react or like change, right? Like if there's collators are behaving in ways that like, you know, that people don't like, right? So, you know, you can't do that if you have like a POA set up, or if you're just going to say, hey, I'm just going to, you know, if like PureStake ourselves, we're like, we're just going to run the collators, or we have like, you know, 2 partners and it's just us and the other guy that's going to run them. I mean, you just like can't do that. And I think for a lot of the, you know, the projects we're working with, these like DeFi projects, like, you know, this is important, right? I mean, they're dealing with like MEV questions like right now, basically, and trying to figure out like what to do and how to, you know, maintain, you know, kind of fairness. On the point around performance, so yes, I mean, I'd say that, and this is where Cumulus has evolved like quite a bit. Still evolving for that matter, like you know, so this has been a big part of the kind of parachain development exercise. So, you know, right now, like, you know, the consensus mechanisms supported by Cumulus are like, you know, pretty rudimentary relative to the consensus mechanism supported when you have like a substrate like sovereign or standalone chain. So you know, when we started, you know, when Cumulus finally was coming together, like there was kind of one and only one option, which was, okay, you can have collators, and like all collators produce a block every time, and then there's just this race. They all kind of spam their blocks like up to the relay chain validators. And so I think this is probably the source of this comment might have been written from that time, where it's like, okay, yeah, if you have 1, 5, or 1,000, you're going to have like 1,000 people all producing the block, and 1,000 blocks being sent to like the relay chain validators that were selected like to finalize like that block, which doesn't really make sense. So that's all stuff that, you know, went into like our like Nimbus like parachain consensus like layer as part of like you know, Moon River and Moonbeam, where basically like we've implemented like a you know, a random selection like from the active set of collators at every block that are eligible for block production. So that's where, if you know, even if you have 1,000, you can say, okay, every block there's just going to be one picked, and that's the person who gets to like author a block. So that's how we're kind of managing that situation a little bit. So there's not just like all, you know, or let's say the case of Moon is like 32, so it's not just 32 people all, and it's like free for all basically. We had this like you know, system where there's a random selection made that should provide fairness across like who gets selected, and then you know, it kind of limits like the spamming basically like of these like blocks like up to the relay chain validators. And these are parameters, by the way, that are going to be changing. You know, they're a certain way now, but like ultimately, you know, they're going to be set a certain way. You know, we're kind of optimizing like on the fairness side in general. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that pretty much answers the next question. I think at one point collators had concerns that the way that the consensus mechanism worked is that this random selection actually picks a subset of, say, 4 collators, and then the one that was closest to the relay chain would kind of win the right to produce the block. So collators had doubts whether that was kind of similar to a proof of work mechanism where kind of the fastest hash wins.
Yeah.
So they were just asking what your vision was kind of moving forward. You already touched upon this.
Yeah,
right?
well, let me speak a little bit more about it. So yeah, that comes down to this like eligibility like parameter is the main one. So the eligibility parameter is this key parameter of Nimbus, which says, you know, at any given block, like, you know, how many collators from the active set like are going to be eligible for block production. And I don't actually, Art, what is it set to right now?
It's at 4 collators are allowed to author a block.
Okay, so and I think actually we're in the middle of this like crazy upgrade, so they may be different numbers now. But basically, like, so right now it's set to 4. So there's like of the, let's say that, assume we had a set of 32, then you'd have like 4 that would be eligible, and that means 4 people are producing a block, and then yeah, it's basically like there is a little bit of proof of work. I mean, in this current setup, there is this little bit of a proof of workish kind of angle to it, which is that like whoever it is that happens to be closest to the randomly selected relay chain validators would kind of win, and they would get the reward, right? So they would be the ones who produce the block. Now, so I think that the way that we've been thinking about it is this, that you have this kind of trade-off like on setting this parameter, right? So like on the one hand, you could say, okay, like we want to set it such that there's 2 collators, let's say, right? So that at any given height, there's 2 collators that are selected for block production. And then, I mean, the good part about that would be that there's redundancy, right? So let's say that, you know, one person is down or is having a problem or can't like author the block, then you have another collator that's there like as kind of a backup that would like author the block. The bad part about like that setup is that, you know, again, like let's say that, you know, one of those collators is somehow from a network perspective, like more strategically positioned, like relative to like the kind of the average of where the relay chain validators are, you know, they'll kind of win the block most of the time, basically, right? So then that's kind of perhaps a fairness issue, right? So you kind of, there's like this redundancy to fairness, like trade-off, like in choosing this parameter. We actually looked at like what a lot of other like networks are doing for this. And, you know, what we've decided for now, like, is that like, you know, while it's set to some other thing now, like ultimately when we get to like the Mooniver launch, we will set this eligibility so that it is like one and only one collator is eligible at any given block height. So what does that mean? So I think that's the most fair thing to do. So that means that, you know, given this random function, there should be an even distribution of blocks, and, you know, regardless of, you know, kind of, you know, where you're located network-wise, as long as it's obviously meets like minimum requirements, you know, there should be like an even distribution of these like block rewards into like the active set. The downside is though that there's no redundancy. So what that means is basically like if one of the collators fails to do their job, then there'll be a skip block basically. So you'll have 12 seconds, there'll be no block, there'll be another 12 seconds, then, you know, the block will be produced by the next person, hopefully. We kind of, you know, so that's basically the same set of decisions that ETH2 has made, like in their implementation. They obviously don't have like a delegation component, but, you know, still even with something like ETH2, it's the same question of, you know, for any given block, like how many people are eligible as candidates, and like what do you do if like a block isn't produced? So they've decided to opt for like, you know, one, and then deal with skipped blocks if that happens. So we'll do the same. I mean, but this is something where, again, I think it's the most fair thing to do, but, you know, it does raise a concern where, you know, we want to make sure that the collators, you know, in the set here. So, you know, the question is kind of what's the incentive? Well, if you don't do a good job of this and miss your block, then you don't get paid. So like there's economics behind it, but there's no penalties right now. So that's kind of the, you know, what we've decided to do. And yeah, I think we'll have to see how that goes. And I think this is where, you know, we want to make sure that we're working with, you know, people running like, you know, good quality setups here, so that, you know, we won't have a lot of skip blocks. So that'll result in like a, you know, not ruinous, but like a poorer user experience, right? If there's a lot of skip blocks, then, you know, there's going to be a lot of like 25-second waits instead of 12-second waits and so on, like even when you're using the UIs of like some of these like applications.
Okay, understood. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. I mean, we're getting close to the end here, so I just want to be mindful of the time. There's basically like 2 more questions. I mean, each question has kind of sub questions. So I don't know if it makes sense to answer one of the 2 or open the floor if anyone has like pressing questions that they want to ask. One is kind of related to staking, like when will it be live? How will the nomination affect the collator's performance of submitting blocks? How will a nominator kind of win rewards? Is that tied to how many blocks the collator submits? That's kind of a group of questions. And then another group of questions is, if a collator self-bonds more tokens, will that represent an advantage? Or is the only advantage to have more bonded tokens is to be in the top of the kind of in the top set of collators that are allowed to participate in the consensus? Those are kind of like the last group of questions. I don't know if you want to pick the ones that are most.
Yeah, so I can just talk to this. Well, let me talk to the last one first, since you just mentioned it. So the bond. So the bond, the main purpose of the bond is more of a security measure, so that there's not like a spamming of like of what's called like unserious like collators. It's mostly that, but the bond will count towards like rewards in the same way as if it were like a nomination, right? So like because we've got that question of like, well, is there any point in like having more bond than like the minimum? So obviously if it did not count towards nomination awards, it would not make sense, but it does. So like you can bond and it's the same, it would be the same as if you like nominated yourself, I guess. Let's just put it that way. I think the bond, like what this minimum is, again, it serves as kind of base like security like function. But that parameter may get like tuned like over time a bit, but that's its main purpose basically, is to provide that.
Okay, understood. I don't know if you think we have enough time before closing remarks for like the stake question and.
Yeah, well, I don't know if no one else had, I don't know if other people had questions. Let's see, there's something in the chat here. Let's see, what's this? Okay, feel free to ask questions. So yeah, on the staking question, remind me, so what was the staking question again?
Yeah, the stake, yeah, when will staking be live? How will nominations affect the collator's performance in terms of submitting blocks? How do nominators win rewards? And is it tied to how many blocks the collator submits, like the nominations?
So the nominations are basically a mechanism to select like who is in an active slot. So this is kind of Cosmos style, there's like basically the active slots, you have n number of active slots, and then the top like collators by like nominated like weight, like token like weight, occupy those slots in descending order. So that's kind of the main functional purpose of nominations. And then of course the nominators are getting like a staking return, like, as a result of like of performing, that service for the network and helping like with the security. But that is kind of the main purpose. The payouts like are happening like based on block production. So like keep me honest here, like Art, by the way, and Tim, if I make any mistakes, but it's basically block production based. So yeah, if you don't produce blocks, then you won't get any rewards. And that was intentional because there is still this open question of like whether there needs to be penalties like in the system to like get the correct behavior or not. We wanted to kind of make a go of it without penalties. I mean, so you could have a system where you have to put a bond up that's like slashable, like based on like, bad behavior. We want to kind of give a go here on just like rewards or lack of rewards. Like if you don't do what you're supposed to do, like instead something like this. So that's kind of, that's how the system works.
All right, perfect. So yeah, I think that more or less wraps up the kind of the collator led questions. I don't know, Derek, if you have any closing remarks. I think we're coming up on like 3 minutes here to the end of the meetup. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would just kind of echo kind of like what what I began with, which is that like you guys, the collator community, kind of the like adding the having this like be like an important function of our chain. These are all like strategic kind of things for the project. I think are very important things for the project. I obviously thank all you guys for the support you've given so far. I think we want to like engage more kind of like with you guys. That was kind of the idea behind like this event, and I think we're trying to think of other ones in the future. So one of the ideas was, hey, should we have a best practices, like share best practices kind of thing, or even our DevOps team could share some of the things that we've either like developed or some of the metrics we look at or other things, that might be useful. So, we'll come up with other ideas for things we can do. And yeah, if you guys have ideas, feel free to kind of let us know. But yeah, we want to, we just kind of, want to engage back with you guys and help foster more community kind of interactions here. So.
All right, cool. So yeah, thank you for your time, Derek, the team, and especially to the collators for kind of showing up today. It's a pleasure to kind of engage with you guys. And as Derek mentioned, I mean, feel free to kind of suggest what events you'd like for us to host to kind of create more engagement. And yeah, thanks a lot for your time, guys.
Yeah, just reach out on Discord as usual. Like if there's any, if any ideas or anything else that comes up, I'm sure I'll see you around there. So.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.